Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, September 8th. This is a special meeting of the Board of Education Curriculum Committee. Our next meeting will be October 13th at 8:30 a.m. I would just like to start by briefly sharing my thanks for all the teachers and staff for getting our schools open smoothly, and we very much appreciate all that they do. And I know that personally my children are excited to be back at school, and I know there's a buzz about the district, so thank you. Today we are excited to hear what was done over the summer with curriculum and what we are looking forward to for this coming school year. So I will turn the meeting over to Dr. Tranberg. Thank you.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you for our first curriculum committee meeting of the year. I want to draw your attention first to the memo that is in the document. So I have a layout of a proposed draft of what we would focus on over the course of the year, slightly modified from last year because we ended up hearing from all of the departments toward the end of last year. So I didn't think we'd want to start this year by hearing from one department again when we just heard from all of them within a short period of time. And I have also asked them when they present their update this year to actually have a focus, not doing a general update since we just received the general update, but if anything that's changed, and to try to feature student work when they're doing those presentations as well. So that's the shift that I propose. And today, I think that these are two worthwhile discussions, these two slide decks, because they represent about 1,000 hours of curriculum work and planning for this year. So anything that you see that is not in this memo that you might want to hear more about this year, I'm glad to discuss that as well. So we'll start with the summer curriculum updates. And just to remind everyone, our mission and vision, we also have our core values and our vision of the graduate are really the anchors of the work that we're doing. This is the first year that we have the competencies of the vision of the graduate are built within our curriculum template. So we're starting to make those connections as well as we're revising and creating units of study. At the elementary level, there was a big focus on learning targets, and that's new language that has not been in our curriculum documents before. You often hear those as I can statements. So we're using language that students can use and teachers can use to make sure they understand the learning expectations for each lesson. SEL we'll talk about quite a bit throughout this presentation, but as you know, we have our ruler implementation, and there were ruler lessons designed across the elementary level. We have not only our new K2 read units of study that were part of our approved budget from last year. So we're waiting for those materials to arrive, and those will be integrated as they arrive. But we're also looking at adding foundations to grade level 3. And as far as student engagement, why does that fit with science and social studies? So during COVID, we spent a lot of time revamping and reorganizing the science and social studies curriculum for delivery virtually through slide decks. And now you learn things, some things you want to keep doing and some things you don't want to keep doing. Something we don't want to keep doing is delivering a lot of instruction through slide decks in science and social studies. So we were undoing some of that work. With our math, this slide just shows the cycle that we went through. We decided to train specific members of each department, and they would, not my favorite word, but I can't think of a better one right now, turnkey it to other people in the department to train them as well, to do the alignment. And then this year really focused on making sure we had those stage 1 developed with the learning goals, the knowledge and skills, and then moving to EduPlanet. And I'll give a shout out to Dr. Bellows, because I think Dr. Bellows, and it's the spirit of the math people, I think they ended up getting about 30 lessons completed in EduPlanet, and 30 that have the stage 1 completed. So that was far beyond what was expected this summer. So go math team. For English, Mr. Janosko took a different approach and focused on specific courses that needed some work. So in the middle school, they looked at English A very closely. At the high school, they looked at English 10, and they were also looking at the new courses that got approved last fall and were approved and supported through the budget. The big one is English 10. That's where there were some big shifts looking at perspective. And I know the question of new curriculum comes up sometimes to this committee. There are not new standards, there are not new competencies, everything is aligned to the approved frameworks in the state. And so a shift, we're moving from Macbeth to 12th Night. So I know there's also questions about when we make a change in in literature. So we're not changing access to Shakespeare, but for the purposes of what fits with the expectations of this course, they are going to 12th night this year. So the summer in social studies, this just gives you an overview of the units that were completed. But I did talk to Mr. Keeler since I gave you the slide deck. So I added one more slide because I asked him, what was the most interesting part of the work for your department this summer? And for the social studies team, it was really wrestling with what are the essential questions. And the essential questions get at, well, why are we even doing this? And with social studies, that's really important because we don't teach social studies so students know all of the names and dates of what happened in the past. There are much deeper reasons we do that. And here are some of the highlights of what the social studies team came up with in their work as they reframed and revised curriculum. I won't read them to you, but I will pause for a minute so you can take a look at thinking about the grade level and how thought-provoking those questions are. So you need a lot to build arguments to support those questions for sure. In science, I'll mention the long-term transfer goals. So that is a piece that we did not have in place in any of our curriculum areas. So you've heard me say we teach for transfer. So when students learn something new, are they going to be able to encounter new learning in the future and make sense of it? So we have transfer goals in every content area now. So the science department spent quite a bit of time on their transfer goals. And we are still working with NGSS it's still relatively new. So we're still working on making sure all of the units of study are NGSS aligned. In world language, we have some turnover in that department. So Adam Hamer, who was the K-5 coordinator, he actually moved back home to Kansas. So Alyssa Valente, who is the Spanish teacher at Oxbridge, is our new coordinator. And we also have another new elementary Spanish teacher at the another new Spanish teacher at the elementary level. So they've worked on some transition and moving things to EduPlanet as well. And in true Christina Maurizio style, she has the 4-year plan of curriculum revision condensed into 1 year, and it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, as she has articulated below. And so I know that is no surprise because she had spent several years getting a lot of curriculum revisions in her department. So a lot of the changes were already new. So it's a little bit less of a stretch for them to get everything into the new platform. The high school Excel program, Christina Brass-Taylor, who's our high school department chair for special education and sports services. She asked for some time this year to do some organizational work with the Excel program. So Brittany Hasek and Kate Curcio worked together to do some planning. They're very excited about the work they were able to accomplish, arrange for more time for students to be with typical peers. And this time was essential because they could start off the year and get to work right away with those things.
May I just add to that, just to elaborate on that a little bit? Thank you, Chris. 2 things also, just to keep in mind that Connecticut SEDS, our new IEP system, although the state is still working on some of the fine tuning of it, is designed to align with state standards. So they haven't been able to release that yet. They're having some difficulty, but we're waiting it patiently. So you'll see in the IEP system now, it is directly aligned with the state standards. So we're looking forward to that. The other piece to let you know on the Excel program, what Kate and Brittany were working on is really looking at a language-based program also to foster expressive receptive language, to look at social skills, and to really look at curriculum as an opportunity to enhance the language component to instruction. So they're doing that in math, in English language arts, in their science and social studies curriculum. With appreciation to the board, we have an additional speech therapist. We look for someone with those expertise in working with students with language needs. So that was part of the emphasis of having Kay Curcio work alongside Brittany as well.
Thank you. For technology and engineering, there's a large focus on the career pathways to make sure that the electives in that department go somewhere. So you're not taking a singleton in this field, and then after you take something that you're interested in, there's nothing to do after it. So there's a step back and looking at, does this make sense? How does it all fit together? Not only within the high school, but also looking at the middle school programs. So over the past few years, we've had new course proposals that are really supporting this effort to make sure there's a clear pathway for those to go through. And a curriculum was developed for the new courses that were approved, as well as the revised principles of engineering class. And K-12 music, when Ms. Thompson was here in the fall, she talked about the First Steps in Music program. So that curriculum scope and sequence was developed. For all classes, those long-term transfer goals were established, and there was the music explorations curriculum was put into EduPlanet as well. And the EduPlanet, just to be clear, EduPlanet's not the answer to anything. It is just a warehouse, but it is really helping everyone press pause and really focus on developing the stage one part of the curriculum. So we're excited about the work that's been done. I wouldn't be surprised if 4 years was too generous of an amount of time to get things done at the rate people embraced the work this summer and really got things done. The important part, once that happens, is we really want to make sure the parent facing side of access to the documents is up to date as quick as possible, so they can see all of the good things that are available.
Thanks, Chris. When do you expect that parent piece to be?
So as a course is done, we will make sure it's updated in course planners. The parent is a part of EduPlanet, but that'll be done. So English 10 is a good example that we should be able to get the English 10 course planner up and done because the whole course is finished. But in the meantime, we have the curriculum at a glance documents that have always been on the website. So we'll update those until we can completely transfer over.
Thank you. I mean, it's clear that there was a lot of really good, thoughtful work being done over the summer. So thank you to all of the people who worked on that. I will open it up for questions. Go ahead, Ms. Farm.
First, just basic question about EduPlanet. Does that mean that all of the curriculums will be up online that people, only because I got a phone call yesterday and I don't know where that is. You're going to have to reach out to the teacher, but is everything going to be up there for easy access?
Yes, and if anything's not up, everything is already on our curriculum website. And if something is missing, it doesn't mean there's not curriculum. It just means for some reason it's not there. I can.
So it's on there. I mean, I
It's on
cannot find it anywhere.
Yes, I can. I'll talk you through it. But if you ask any other questions, I'll see if I can do two things.
Okay. Okay. I do have other questions unless anybody else wants
Go
to
ahead.
jump.
Go ahead.
To English 10, I wanted to talk about the required readings and not Shakespeare. Of course, we all want different perspectives, but I've gotten a lot of feedback this year about the required reading for English 10 because it was very sexual in nature, that not every parent was comfortable with that, at a 15-year-old reading about it. Now, I know that some, kids are more mature than others, and absolutely, but when it's one thing when I think the options for the regular English class were just options and thoughts. And so parents could go through that and say, okay, I don't want you reading this. I don't want you reading that. But when it's a required reading and it has that content, I'm just wondering where the boundaries are when we're kind of pushing into young kids' lives with that.
So let me talk to Mr. Janosko about that a little bit first. I know he did have some calls that he said he managed over the summer, and he felt like those ended
Okay.
well. Technically, if those books are in the curriculum, those are the required books for the course, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, because this is a little new to me, this concern. One, is this for just English 10 or English honors?
Honors. Sorry. Honors.
Okay, so honors, you elect to take honors. And typically there are requirements in all honors classes. And the thought is the kids are ready for some more work. Second, when we say that we had a lot of complaints, are there, can we encapsulate that? Like, how many calls did Mr. Janosko get? Tara, how many people did you heard to? Like, I'm trying to figure out what a lot means.
I think that's helpful.
I would have to go back and look at the uproar, but it was uproar. I mean, let's just put it this way. I wouldn't read it here. I would be uncomfortable reading it on the board, and I wouldn't have wanted my 15-year-old reading it. Now, and she was honors English. and is fairly mature, but I don't know why that is something that there's so much out there. There's so much fantastic literature out there. I just don't know why.
So I don't know
We
the
have to
book.
push
I
it.
don't have a 10th grader, so I don't know this particular book. So I'm not making a comment on the kids or the book. I'm just trying to understand, like, when we say we heard a lot or there's an uproar, like what that means, because then we have decisions to make. And I don't, since I didn't hear anything, I don't have a context for it.
So I
I'm just
heard from
looking-
at least 100 people. Now,
Could
they
you
would-
share
that-
those with us so we understand?
Now, that's not 100 people that had kids in the class, right? That's, like 100 people that then hear about it and then have kids in the district that don't want their kid eventually, reading that or being forced to read it. And I just think that there should be possibly options, right, for kids. Like I said, regular English. Someone did say something to me about those books, and I said, well, those were suggestions. And if you didn't want your child to read them, they don't need to read them. You can bring it in, but when it's required, that's.
Yeah, I always love options for kids. So I love the idea of options for kids, but maybe if you could share so we have some context. And what was the book in question? I don't even know.
It's called Things We Lost to the Water.
Oh yeah, my kids read it last year. Sorry. I just didn't know the assigned book.
Can I just add,
go for it.
just as another point of reference, I do have an honors 10th grade English student, and I haven't heard one mention of
I've not heard
concern
this
about the
either,
book.
so.
So
Just,
maybe-
just to point out another side of
So
it.
maybe if we could pool information just so we have a fair perspective of how different people, that would help it. I mean, I know we don't pick resources, but then we can have a better discussion.
Yeah, no, I guess I get that some people will be fine with it. I think we just need to take into consideration people's values, and when people are offended by it, I mean, I realize we're public education and they could go elsewhere. But I think when we start pushing in that direction, it muddies the waters a bit.
Yeah, I'm just looking for context. I don't have any.
Yeah, I don't
so-
either.
So I would love some.
And
I
Mr.
didn't even know it was an
Janasco clearly
issue.
had a reason for assigning the book, and I would love to know the rationale for that.
Yeah.
So.
And I think he had 2 calls from my conversation with him. 90% he said 2.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so it would just help us, it would help me to understand what the concern and the discourse is, because before we start getting into the debates of like, and Tara, I'm not picking on you, I'm just using this as an example of like how to contextualize this, of like literature that offends. I want to understand who's worried about what.
Right.
And then we can have a more robust conversation. I'm a little flying blind on this one.
Yeah, I have not heard anything of this to this point.
And I'll
so.
work on a response from Mr. Janasco and get that to you before the next meeting, because he's not scheduled as of right now until much later in the year.
Okay.
So
Well, I don't want to actually make work for Mr. Janasco if I don't understand the scope of the concern, right? Like, I mean, I have books that I've told my kids, like, you're not ready for it, right? Like, so I understand that. But before I make Mr. Janasco do work, I'm just looking to understand how wide scale this is.
Yeah.
I did have a question on English 10, if I could just add that in. It mentions on the slide that elaborates on what was done, that they prioritized a vision of the graduate competency. And I would love to understand a little more about that, either now or as a follow-up, what that means.
they revise the competency.
They prioritize.
It says they prioritized a vision of the graduate competency.
Yeah, English section.
So there are, with the 6 competencies in the vision of the graduate, there are going to be certain competencies that align with some disciplines over other disciplines. So it's going to be likely that different departments say, we're really going to focus on this through our courses and develop assessments. Specifically, what we need to do with vision of the graduate K through 12 or PK through 12 is show where are we preparing students for these things starting in the beginning and embedding those assessments. So it would refer to how that department is doing that. And I can also ask, since this is a priority as they're presenting their updates in the spring, to make sure they're making connections to that. I think that'll be helpful to us and to them as
Right,
they're
I think
doing
that'd be
that.
great for us to keep reminding ourselves how this is helping us work toward these goals. So that's terrific. Thank you.
I have a couple quick questions about the elementary curriculum. Can you just give, I know you said that learning targets were like I can statements. Can you just give an example of what that would be so we can have a,
Yeah, so the way that workshop is designed is there's a mini lesson that goes with every reading lesson, every writing lesson starts with about a 10-minute direct instruction. And as a result of that direct instruction, ideally, there's something that students can do So I can write a complete sentence, or I can write a short story, or I can make a connection to a character in the story. So there are big I can statements and there are small. So a big one might be related to a whole unit, and a small one might be what you want a student to be able to do at the end of that specific lesson. And those will all be on those stage ones, completely listed. These are the I cans, which is great because it's also language that we can all understand. It's not written as a standard or an objective. It's just common language of what do we expect kids to be able to do as a result of this.
Great, thank you. And also, so the foundations is now through third grade. Is that the end point, or do you continue throughout fourth and fifth?
I don't think foundations will go beyond third, but we are looking at opportunities for word study in fourth and
Okay.
fifth, because word study is important.
Yeah.
Beyond third grade.
Agreed, thank you. Anything else?
I just have one question about the social studies, and I love those questions. You know, they obviously lend themselves to debate and critical thinking. Are the students going to be allowed to use their option of sources when it comes to debate? I know that last year in some of the social studies classes and such, when some things were put out there, they were relegated to using only certain sources that the teacher deemed, you know, acceptable. You know, and I'm not saying that people should be going for, you know, out there sources that, you know, but there are a lot of sources out there that have different opinions that I believe students should be able to bring all of that in order to have a true debate.
Just high school or middle school?
High school.
Okay. So let me get back to you on that too, because sometimes teachers are vetting sources to narrow the world, not intentionally
Which
to
is
bias.
fine, but then
to-
there needs to,
Yes, to make sure that it is representative.
yes.
Any else? We're good?
Okay, we looked back, so now we'll look ahead. So the four big buckets, so to speak, for teaching and learning this year are social and emotional learning, math acceleration, gifted education, and teaching and learning in general. So I'll dive into each of those a bit. So we have ruler implementation. I think you've become somewhat familiar with the mood meter from our presentation last spring, and I think several of you had the opportunity to see Dr. Mark Brackett at Convocation this year. That was very well received. So we have the pleasantness along the x-axis, and we have energy along the y-axis, and the importance of asking on a regular basis, how are you feeling? And then we can plot our feelings based on our pleasantness and our energy. I have one of my very good friends called me last night. She has a first-time kindergartner who was having trouble in school, so she wanted strategies to use at home. And so I'm not a parent, but I relied on Ruler and talked about this tool. So she already has a poster that is getting printed out today with the mood meter in her home. So hopefully I'm guiding her appropriately. So we also have our CSDE pilot, the Connecticut State Department of Education pilot with our SEL screener. We have another training coming up within the next week, and we're also working with elementary teachers. So we will keep you apprised of any progress on that as we learn more. We have a district SEL committee that we started last spring. Right now I'm co-chairing that with Mrs. Droller and Dr. McCarthy. And we are working on building a website with parent resources for SEL, and that should be ready prior to our next curriculum committee meeting. And another piece is looking at our health curriculum K-12. So looking back, our last health update to you was in 2018, 2019, and that was a new health curriculum with a skills-based curriculum. I met with the health teachers at the middle school and high school last spring to assess how that's going. There's a lot of goal setting and independence that goes with the design of that curriculum, and they do like many aspects of it, but they also feel that there was a bit of a trade-off of the direct instruction and content. So when we go back and revisit that, we want to make sure that that balance is there, and also especially looking at health at the elementary level.
Mr. Chang,
Yes.
just coincidentally, I was in the middle school yesterday, and the art teacher shared with me, I don't know if you happened to see it, it got retweeted by Mark Brackett, that the kids had done beautiful renditions of their book bags and what they carry with them, the emotions and so on. So the creativity of what they did was unbelievable. Some of the emotions were hidden underneath the zipper. Color was involved. the way the words or some of them didn't do work. I'll actually share some of them, I think, because they were just fabulous. And just so happens, Mark
I saw that last night. These
posted
are
that
amazing.
on social. Oh, there's a couple right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Was that on the slide?
You just put
It
in.
wasn't, I added it because I saw it last night.
Okay. Anyway, those are only a few of them, but it's just phenomenal job she did.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So, and Mallory's so talented and so are the students. Look at that work. So not only is it making that connection, but I know I've said to you many times, there's implicit instruction with SEL and explicit. And you might, what the heck is he talking about some of the time? And so this is a really good example of, this is an explicit lesson on how you can take what we know about Ruler, the mood meter tool, and bring it to life. And
I think the top right one is like more creatures in it, or it wasn't words and so. Anyway,
yeah, it's beautiful work for sure. And Dr. Brackett retweeted with a, "This is really cool." One of the most important tools beyond the mood meter that we are expecting teachers to use this year is really creating those charters. And this is just a reminder. So we're using that language with each other, that a charter is created usually by class, and it looks at how we want to feel and what are the things we need to do in order to feel it. And then as a class, you make an agreement to those things and you somehow mark it. So this is, I love this example because the last two, peaceful and silly, they're not typical words that we would think that a group of students would necessarily prioritize as how they want to feel. But at the same time, it completely resonates with me, and I love feeling silly, and to feel like you can be in this learning space where it's okay to be silly is a wonderful thing.
What grade level was that?
This is an elementary. And as an adult, I'm always good for the silly. With math acceleration, I think that's on for November. What you can expect is the multiple opportunities for access, which I think is important. So, I mean, on-ramps and off-ramps at different times, and on-ramps and off-ramps that aren't going to impact your future and prior learning. So it's going to take some finesse and planning with our math curriculum in general, and that would be through differentiation, which differentiation has always been a priority. I know you've heard about that for plenty of time, but the idea of curriculum compacting, so that would be within a unit of study. If a student knows what's happening within that unit, they can move beyond or have more challenging work within the context of those standards for that unit only, and then come back. Then acceleration is when you move beyond likely a grade level, typically. For gifted education, we looked back at our work last year, and we reviewed our gifted education program evaluation from summer of 2021. So we are prepared to make a recommendation about achievers for the fall, and that will likely come through our course proposal, our course modification process. The middle school curriculum and schedule is still a priority, and the plan years ago was for achievers to be idea to become an elective at the middle school, but as you know, the electives haven't really found footing yet, and so students are still experiencing that program through their lunch, which is not a popular choice. And at the same time, which we've talked about as at a table, it's also not a popular choice for students to be missing their academic courses, even if it's once every 8 weeks in order to access that program. So that's still a priority. Looking at the identification process comes up on a regular basis for us administratively, but the priority within that is making sure we have a way to identify for talents, not just academic gifts. So that's our close look for this year. And then also indicators of how do we know the program is successful? So we know where people are satisfied and where they're not satisfied, but that doesn't necessarily correlate with how can we take a look? How can we measure? How do we know that there's personalized learning? How do we know that there's growth? So we want to come up with some strategies for that this year. That all aligns with the evaluation. So we're just kind of taking the next recommendations or considerations. I believe
add one thing to that, Chris, also. That also includes looking at twice exceptional students within the context of those 4 areas.
And the last piece is teaching and learning. So this is broken down into instructional priorities. And this might be where you want to hear more over the course of the year. And I'm glad to dig into any of these as we develop our agendas. But as I mentioned, the units of study and the move to EduPlanet, We are still waiting for the new social studies frameworks. That was supposed to be last, I believe, winter, and we haven't received anything on that. There is a new health framework, and so that health framework will be referenced when we are looking at the health curriculum. However, that new health framework is based on a national framework that already existed, and it's almost identical. So the last revision of our health curriculum there's not much new based on the last time that happened. The co-teaching in 5th grade is new this year. We also have integration. These are 2 requirements, the integration of the ISTE standards. And I don't know if it's a requirement, but it's certainly in the ask recommendation to make sure you have integration of the vision of the graduate competencies throughout your K-12 curriculum. So that's our instructional priorities. And then in alignment with the strategic plan, we need to finalize our principles of teaching and learning. That was a year 2 deliverable, and we're well underway with that process. That is actually will feed into the last bullet of developing the new teacher evaluation and feedback system, which the board will likely need to approve, at least support, if not approve it. But that's another timeline I'm a little bit worried about because we have not heard much. There were focus groups last spring. We are supposed to receive the new guidelines late this fall, early this winter, because if we're going to create a new feedback and evaluation system, it's pushing it to say you have 4 months to get this done and get it approved. So I'm a little skeptical about that. So in the meantime, we're still on the waiver system that the state has been issuing. And then we're continuing to update the curriculum website. So to answer Ms. Worm's question, where is it? There's 2 ways to get to it. You can get to it from district information curriculum, or you can get to it from parents, the parents tab, other resources curriculum. So there's 2 paths, gets you to the same place. And if something's missing, they should go to the department area leader first to ask questions about the curriculum specific to those departments.
Sarah, can I just ask a question on that? Just for anyone watching, to be specific, those are going to be curriculum documents, not necessarily resources. Am I correct?
Yeah, so it'll at the very least list, this is the unit. These are the standards for that unit and the general focus area.
Thank you.
Questions from other members?
I think my only question is about the math acceleration. Do you guys envision how that's going to happen? Is it just going to be in the classroom? I mean, listen, I've been wanting math acceleration for years, but it is a lot to ask one teacher to handle that many different levels in a classroom.
Yes, it's a ripple. So I think that it's going to take time. It's not going to be like, and here's our new math acceleration and we're doing it next year. It has to phase in because one thing is going to affect the other. The basic philosophy that has been coming back as we've had all of these discussions is why, if a student is ready to double accelerate, they were likely ready to be pushed earlier on. So that's the theory. And so we want to make sure we can address that because a double acceleration is developmentally usually not a good thing.
Right.
And if they're ready to double accelerate, then the question becomes, well, were they challenged appropriately before? So that's what we're trying to balance. So it might mean we're going to try to do things differently, but 8th grade would end at the same point, or the opportunity to end at the same point. So right now it's like, it'll be a K-8 recommendation is how things have been moving so far.
I think that's great. And I love the idea of, different pathways and on-ramps and off-ramps. I think that's really important. Ms. Best.
Thank you. On that note, excuse me, I would just ask that we make sure that we communicate these changes very loudly and very clearly to parents, because whether intended or not, elementary math is a place where this stress starts because people have ideas of what's going to happen when their kid gets to middle school and what math class they're in. And I think if we can address that really carefully, we can make great progress in not letting that get started at that level.
This isn't even anecdotally because I've heard enough students say it. When I visit a 5th grade math classroom and I ask students why it's important to learn what they're learning in math, their answer very often is for the accelerated math placement test.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's problematic.
I would agree.
I agree with you. Ms. Zachary.
So Mrs. Worm and I have been discussing math for, 10 years. So we're really glad, I think, both of us, that this is getting addressed. But I do have some questions because it sounds great, but how do you put it in practice? One, I agree, in a classroom, it can be I think we have fabulous teachers and they can do amazing things, but it is a lot of levels sometimes to handle. But two, this concept of on-ramps and off-ramps and the pressure as Mrs. Best to accelerate or double accelerate really is to get to a point in high school, oftentimes, because there is a perception, real or not, that there's a certain amount of math needed to maybe take standardized tests. So, but math is also cumulative, right? So if kids double accelerate, I think we've heard the board sometimes, or accelerate too early, that they have missed content, right? They're studying for a test. And we have other kids who needed to be pushed earlier. I'm happy to hear you say that. And just maybe got bored in math because they weren't being pushed. So how do we actually do this in practice where we make sure kids are getting the foundation so they really understand the foundations of math, but we also are actually creating different pathways and getting all students to a similar point unless they're really ready to push ahead. And I say that because some kids are, right? And some kids aren't. I was a kid who wasn't. I know plenty of kids who could do better math than me today.
I'm still not.
Yeah, I think we're there, right? But there are kids who, so I just don't understand it. I want it to happen so desperately, but I just don't understand how to achieve it.
So it's on the agenda for November, so I expect a very
It is,
robust
and we're going, and
conversation.
we'll actually work backwards with the data of this is who ended in this course. This is, well, not naming the students obviously, but this is the percentage of students who were in accelerated math. We're looking at the different pathways they took to get there. And then we'll talk about what's the change for, let's say, general instruction, just teaching a math lesson, and how does differentiation look different than we expect it to now? Then the next, it's almost a tiered system. So tier one, differentiated instruction that all students have access to. Tier two would be compacting. Students show before the unit even starts, or as one of my former colleagues used to say, an 8:15er. The kid didn't know at 8 o'clock, but they knew at 8:15. So what are we doing for that student? And then the students that not only already knew it, but could almost teach it. So, and we can't expect that same teacher in front of those students to do all of those things at the same time, not possible. So that won't be in the recommendation. So that's why I said the recommendations will look different, and then it'll be out there for us to discuss. And I'm sure
And then
receive feedback.
the only point I would back up is Mrs. Best, because this is so deeply entrenched kind of in town. And I would agree that stress begins both kids and parents early on. That we really, once we've figured out the how and the board understands the how, we press it out to the public, because taking away that stress, I don't like hearing, let's say, I get concerned when I hear fifth graders trying to learn to a test, right? In fifth grade. I hope they're dreaming about other things.
Right. Agreed. Other questions? All right, we'll move to public comment if there is any.
Good morning. Anyone in person? If you would like to participate via Zoom, please click the raise hand option. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Ackman, second by Mrs. Best. All in favor? Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.